And we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sundays with Solus number 9 for January 15th, 2017. I'm Joshua, and joined with me today is Brian.
Hello.
And Ike.
Sup?
So it's been a bit crazy in the Solus land the last couple weeks, and I'm going to let Ike talk about all the stuff he's been doing with Clear Boot Manager and multiple kernels and all that fun stuff.
Oh, thank you very much for starting me off with a hard topic then, shall we? So basically, one of the weakest points in Solus for a long time has been the kernel upgrade policy, which effectively has been an in-place update of the kernel. Now, while that doesn't sound like a problem, it's not until you look at the specifics of how it works that you realize the negative effects on Solus. I.e., if you update in place, all your kernel modules disappear, which means you can't load any new kernel modules, such as plugging in a USB stick and then nothing happening because it's not able to load them. So it kind of makes the upgrade process that bit more delicate. Delicacies aside, it also makes the kernel update process completely a one-way, which again isn't particularly friendly. So if for whatever reason a kernel update goes out that's not good for you, you're kind of stuck on it. Now, to be fair, I mean, up until now, we've probably had 2 kernel update failures, and they've only ever been on unstable, which is where they're supposed to stay. So, I mean, we've had a good history with it, but still would rather take no chances. So, enter Clear Boot Manager. This is something that, obviously that I've written and is used within Clear Linux for a long time now to solve these kind of problems and other issues with boot and updating. The idea is that you want a completely bulletproof update, i.e. you push anything, that's fine, but I should be able to reboot just in case something's gone wrong. So the way Clear Boot Manager works is slightly different. You will always keep the kernel you're running on now, which, completely eliminates the problems I've discussed earlier on. You will then get the newest kernel you're updating to, i.e. the update itself. And in most cases, you'll also keep the last kernel that booted successfully that isn't the current kernel you're on. So you end up with a choice between these kernels. So if anything does go wrong, you've always got a way out of it. You've always got something you can boot back to. On top of that, it automatically garbage collects, so you're not left with these stray files all over the system. Those are automatically managed for you. So I've got most of the side of that done. Last week, setting the stage, if you like, for Solus to use Clear Boot Manager. I think there was 1,500 line additions, 3,000 removals, an update to a Git submodule, 5 pull requests, and 22 commits. Just getting this stuff ready there last week. So once that's all done, Solus will be switching over to this kernel management mechanism. And the beauty is, with that, we get support for extra kernel types out of the box. So once we do the upgrade, everyone will automatically be moving to the LTS kernel, which will be the 4.9 branch. In future, we'll also have support for like LTS and mainline existing concurrently on your system. So you can just reboot between any version of them without any kind of messing around. So that would be nice.
Yeah, and I think the part that I'm most excited about is the fact that I've been bitten a few times by, failed kernel upgrades and the like. So having the ability to roll back is going to be really fantastic.
Well, yeah, I mean, the way the whole boot and update thing is done at the moment, apart from it just being weak in Solus, don't get me wrong, in some other distros, it's a little bit better. But it's not great. Like, if we look at certain areas, say, for example, updating grub post-install, which for anyone who's using legacy boot on Solus, like, grub is kind of vital to you being able to boot again. One of the things that update grub is actually responsible for is finding out which one of the disks that your root partition lives on. Now, on top of that, it's also got to figure out if that's encrypted.
Yeah.
but it doesn't.
No, I've kind of learned that from all the times, like every single kernel upgrade, it's been me having to go in and manually add the rd.lux.uuid and intruding in and making sure that I get the proper like block ID and all. It's just
Mm.
it's delightful.
So it's, of my opinion, this stuff should be automatic. Like, it shouldn't be stored off in a text file somewhere. This should be this should be the domain of one tool that can look at your partition and go, oh, well, I can say this is the slave device of an LVM, and that's again part of a Lux system,
Right.
which you can do just by looking at the sysfs. And it can additionally go, okay, well, I have this, I'm writing out the kernel parameters. Why don't I also record the fact that it's encrypted? So those are the kind of things I'm trying to solve at the moment, which will be nice. And I mean, for Solus, it's a huge change. I mean, for one, we'll be getting parallel kernel versions, which we've never had because we've gone about things a very, very easy, simple method. This should help.
Yeah. So how, from the maintenance point of view, is that going to help us roll out new kernels and test new kernels?
Yeah, because we've always been a bit worried because the idea of unstable is, people don't run unstable because it's unstable.
Right.
In practice, people do run unstable, even though we tell them not to, but sometimes we need them to. And so if it was safer to run unstable, i.e. you didn't update and then permanently brick your install, then that would make life easier for all of us because we run on unstable and help us to get tested quicker. Because at the moment, one of the things we say is like, well, we might push out a bricked blah, blah, blah on unstable, which hasn't been tested yet. So this would be one of those changes that would greatly mitigate most of our concerns. And from our perspective, we just have to push a bump and wait for tests to come in.
And when we're testing the kernels, it makes it a lot easier for us to do tests on bare metal hardware because we don't have to spin up an ISO to do it anymore. We can actually just install the package local and not worry about it breaking our current install.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I end up doing both. It's always an ISO first, which is basic bootability. Like, if it's not booting on an ISO, you've done something very, very badly wrong. Which, I've managed to push that one out before. Sorry, Josh.
No, it's okay. That's what unstable's for.
Yeah, and I mean, once that, I guess, that flash test is done, then it's an install local, which can still go wrong there, but having the parallel kernels, the ability to go back to an older kernel, will be greatly helpful.
Yeah, and speaking of doing updates, Brian has been working on something we're referred to as Kappa for tracking upstream projects and software updates. So I'll let him talk about that.
Yeah, so Kappa. So it's actually an acronym, and it's a poorly made one, but it's the Comprehensive Upstream Provider Polling Assistant. And really, what I'm trying to get across there is that as a package maintainer and as a distro maintainer, there's a lot of different pieces of software that we have to constantly keep track of updates. And unfortunately, in the year 2017, there's not some unified way of doing this. Right now, a lot of this is a very manual process where we'll be subscribing to mailing lists, to news feeds. We'll be scouring the internet for these new updates, and it's a very manual process. And because it's manual, it's not uncommon for us to miss when a current update comes out, and sometimes lag actually getting that out to our users. So if you look at the way that some other projects do this, we'll see that they're either kind of like Arch, where they rely a lot on community feedback with the AUR to let them know that there are new versions of things coming down the pipe, or they'll be more like Fedora and Red Hat, which will use a centralized system to keep track of things. Now, the centralized stuff is nice, but it's also typically very distro-specific. So in the case of Fedora, they're using a system called Anitya, I think I'm pronouncing that right, that actually uses the Fed message system in order to send out these notifications to all the package maintainers. So that's not necessarily sustainable, and I wanted to kind of come up with a better way of doing that. So Kappa is meant to be a distro agnostic way of doing all this upstream tracking. It's decentralized, so we don't have to have some central server that's keeping track of all of this necessarily. And it's written in Go, so it's going to be modern and fast and all that, and be able to leverage the wealth of libraries that we have for interacting with all these different sources of potential updates and upstream notifications. So at least initially, Kappa already has support for CPAN, GitHub, PyPy, RubyGems, and actually the JetBrains tools. So that's something that I've been working on for a little over a month or two now. And in the future, I'd like to pull in FTP support so we can handle things like the GNOME.org FTP servers for pulling in all of their updates. Any Git source, so regardless of whether it's GitHub or somewhere else, if we're using one of our Git sources, we should be able to query the tags and figure out what the latest ones are and then use that as further notification. It's Hackage for Haskell, Launchpad, because there's a lot of projects that are moving from SourceForge to Launchpad. SourceForge is still there, so I'd like to support them too. And then I'd also more recently decided that I'd like to be able to support RSS feeds and the Node Package Manager upstreams. So yeah, I guess holistically, this is meant to be a tool that I can run from the command line to automatically go out and check for updates for all these packages, and then we can use that as feedback to make this process a lot easier.
Very, very cool stuff. One of the things I would like to point out there, and I feel is very, very important to this conversation, is I hate SourceForge. Absolutely hate it.
Yeah, I really like it when they don't actually provide a proper follow, refer, location stuff for like when a mirror drops a package or doesn't have one and you need to change to a different mirror. Yeah, that's all great. SourceForge, thanks for that. Yeah.
I mean, I know this shouldn't be like me hitting on SourceForge or anything like that, but I've had a problem with them for the longest time. So if you have a project and you're using SourceForge, please, for the love of God, do not. Having to track 30 redirects for a single URL, which you're not allowed to get, just so that you can be bombarded with advertisement after advertisement, with the possibility that you won't get the original tarball that you asked for, that's then been sideloaded, or you're going to be bombarded with exes if you're on Windows that no longer contain the original author's content. You should not be supporting that. Now, in this day and age, I'm sorry, but SourceForge, you have lost all reputation going forward. You might be trying to improve now, but at the end of the day, make life very, very hard for any distro maintainer. And anyone will tell you having to go through 30 redirects and SSL loops just to be able to get to the original tarball, it's unacceptable. So that's my nugget of love for Sunday.
I can say that at least based on my own anecdotal observations, there have been a lot of projects within the last 5 years that have switched away. With GitHub and Launchpad being the two main places we see them moving to.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah,
Hope it
at least Launchpad provides a static URL that typically doesn't change, so you can at least rely on it. You don't have to track.
Don't get me started on Launchpad. Launchpad are now just as bad for the redirects crap.
Really?
Well, so I have good news for that though, Ike, because I've been poking through their API and I can actually get you directly to the link.
Well, at least they do have an API. That's a big +1 there.
Yeah, because SourceForge doesn't have one at all. So they have an API, but the API is for a project manager to go through and push new tarballs and things. It's not for us to be able to discover where those are. So I'm thinking that's probably going to have to be more of an HTML scraping kind of a deal, which makes me a little bit upset. But we'll see. That's definitely one of the lower priorities, because I think at this point most of our software is either coming from GitHub or some other source like PyPy or RubyGems. So
I mean, if there's one thing in this world that I truly love, it's the creation of sealed and closed ecosystems for the benefit of those who run them.
Well, on that bombshell, So I finally got done with the Help Center docs porting of all the wiki content and the older user guide content over to that. So development is expected to start in February because I'll be having a vacation starting on Saturday. So the development for the Help Center will be starting in February and hopefully a rollout by mid to late February. And this Help Center will be able to provide a centralized location that is much more accessible, both in terms of a user experience, but as well as just in general being able to update documentation with a much more easier process, especially for third-party contributors than our current wiki. So that is going to be happening. I'm also doing budgie development. So the initial designs were finalized, and I did a stream last week regarding some of the initial structuring of the website. And I'll be doing some refactoring of how styling is handled between Budgie and the Solus brand asset, so the website and Soul Hub and all that. And I anticipate that that'll be finished up within the next couple of days, and we'll be able to roll out the new Budgie website before the end of next week. So I really look forward to that. So do you guys have any bombshells that you'd like to drop looking at UI key?
I said only, what was it, 11 minutes ago, maybe? No bombshells?
Yeah.
I probably lied. We will need to start getting ready for a new snapshot again soon. Mainly because of the changes that are coming in. So the current kernel system goes away, the new one goes in. So yeah, that's kind of my main one.
And some development-oriented stuff on the side. I believe we have some testers for some 970 changes. Is that correct?
Yeah, so basically, long story short, we was running with the stable version of Nova. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but then I'm not French, so I'm sorry. Please tell me afterwards how you're actually supposed to pronounce it. I pronounce everything wrong. Don't take no offense. Well, probably should. Anyway, so the version of Nova that we had just gone through a stable update. I think this was around October, November last year. And they basically removed support for Maxwell completely, which I didn't realize. So yeah, if you had like a G70, it's like, it's just not even going to start for you. The official advice was to use the mode setting driver. That's great if you have to actually ship the Nova as well anyway. So that was unhelpful. However, there does appear to be preliminary support in Git that went in late last year that restores some kind of Maxwell support using the internal EXA acceleration. So in Solus, we would then update to a Git version of this package and get people to test it. So anyone who actually had issues booting with the 970, but basically the Maxwell series, if you had issues booting because you got a black screen, well, let us know. We'll get a test ISO out so you can just boot that up and see if it does work.
Yeah, because it'd be really great, because for the longest time it's been sort of a thorn in our side, the whole 970 series. Well, 970 and the Optimus variant is always going to be a thorn in our side until LDM, but it's going to be really great to actually have an ISO snapshot that'll have support for the 970.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those long-standing things. So at the moment, Solus is basically going for a maturation phase because some of the older, long-standing bugs that have been around since the dawn of time almost, they're all now being treated. One of the longest ones that we've had perpetually on our Reddit is this 970 issue. It seems to come back every couple of weeks.
Yep.
The kernel update issue is one of the ones that we're seeing constantly on IRC. Basically, the standard response is, well, have you updated recently and not rebooted? We don't want people to have to reboot straight away. So the beginning of this year is kicking some of the old issues out and strengthening Solus. So it's going to be a very, very interesting couple of months.
It certainly is, especially if you take a look at, I hate to pimp it, but this year in Solus, we actually talk about some of the items on our roadmap for 2017, particular Q1 and a bit of Q2. So if you haven't read that, go to our blog. You you can at solus-project.com/blog and read up on that. So if neither of you have anything more to add, I believe that we could call it for Sundays with Solus number 9.
But
And
what we didn't actually mention there is the other reason for why this kernel changes is so good. It actually enables Optimus.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So that's like a kind of a sexy, dangerous buzzword to drop in the Solus Ocean these days.
Switchable graphics.
Yeah, I mean, people have wanted this now for a very, 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 very long time. So these kernel update changes, they don't come on their own. It's part of a larger plan to improve how we basically do kernel management and kernel driver management within Solus. NVIDIA falls under that entire umbrella. So once we've got this basic first part done, we'll be giving it a couple of days testing within our repos just to make sure the driver stuff is completely solid. Then afterwards, we're completely changing the driver management on top of the kernel management. So once that's done, we will actually get rid of our current I can't speak today. Get rid of our current method, and we'll have initial support coming in for Optimus, which will basically look at your configuration as it is, and instead of trying to guess what it's supposed to do, it will actually know what to do by doing the right kind of detection, which is how Solus is supposed to work. So yeah, another week, maybe 2, then we'll have, dynamic kernel updates, multiple versions, and basic preliminary Optimus. So that's my bombshell. Back to you.
I don't really have any sort of bombshells to add to that. So, Brian, do you have any?
Not this week.
Yeah. Okay. Not this week. All right. Well, on that cliffhanger, maybe you'll have to wait until our next Sundays with Solus. And I hope that it's not going to be several months from now. I do apologize. So thank you for joining us, and have a great morning, afternoon, evening, whatever. And bye.
Bye.
Bye.